Hello BookTube, this is part 41 of my 2022 library tour, Science Fiction and Fantasy 18. Today I'm going to be finishing off the 8-sided bookcase. It's a open-ended shelving unit I picked up from Walmart years ago that I use as a double-sided bookcase. So let's get going. So the first book on this shelf is TheShattered World by Michael Reeves. I picked this up from the Friends of the Library Book Sale Nook, as I want to do. I haven't gotten around to it yet. The next three books are by Alastair Reynolds. First is Chasm City. This is one of his I am blanking on the name of the series. I think it's like its Revelation series, because the first book's Revelation Space. So in this novel, it's the story of an immortal man who was on a colonization ship in which he in a race to get there first, he sabotaged the other colony ships and did a whole slew of other bad actions. Not only on that planet, but also in the titular Chasm City. I've had this book forever, and this is one of those books that I didn't particularly get on with it the first time I tried it, and then I got it the second time I read it, but I haven't returned to it in at least a decade or more. It has to be far more than a decade, probably closer to 15 years since I read it. But I do sort of have a soft spot for Alastair Reynolds, even though I don't really actually read him. I just collect his books. So this is Pushing Ice, which is, I think, a standalone novel not set in his Revelation Space series. I think it's like a space opera crime procedural novel. And I picked it up from the Friends of the Library Book Sale a few years ago. Or maybe Golden's, because I swear one of these Alastair Reynolds books I picked up from Golden's. But they're both ex-library copies, so I could be wrong. But this is Redemption Arc, which is one of the Revelation Space books. I think it's the third one, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. And this came originally from the Hewitt Community Library. So either Golden's or Friends of the Library Book Sale. And this is a novel by Anne Rice. This is Blackwood Farm. It's one of the Mayfair Witches novels, I think. And I picked it up from Golden's Book Exchange because I had a brief hankering for Anne Rice. And this was the only one they had, or the only one I thought was interesting or something. I don't know why I picked it up. I just did. The next three books are all of a series. I don't quite remember what the series name is, but the series begins with The Tiger's Daughter by K. Arsenault Rivera. This is the story of two young noble women from two warring peoples. One will become Empress of her homeland, the other a important leader of her people, and they are in a relationship. They eventually marry, and this is the story of how they met and their first adventures together. I have tried to like this book three or four times. I think checked it out from the library, and then bought a copy for myself in the hopes of trying to eventually get a handle on this book and to like it. And I don't like this book at all. Which raises the question, why exactly do I have the other two books in this trilogy? I guess on the hopes that I actually would eventually love this book, but I don't. And I don't like it largely because it's written partially as an epistolary novel. And the problem with that is that it's basically a giant as you know, because, obviously the addressee, she knows everything that's already going on. She just maybe not necessarily what her wife thought of it. But it's also a tad orientalist, I think, in the world building, and that kind of always bugged me. So, yeah. But I do have the Phoenix Empress, which is the second book in the series, and the Warrior Moon, which is the third book in the series. The next two books are by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is A Trail of Lightning. This is the first book in a duology that I'm assuming is called TheShattered World. It's a post-apocalyptic urban fantasy set on the Navajo reservation in a world in which things have gone to hell climatically, and magic exists. It's about a young woman who is a monster hunter on the Navajo reservation who gets into a number of issues. There were some things about the novel I liked, but I think for the most part, I didn't particularly care for it all that much, despite me trying to talk myself into liking it. But I do have the second book in the duology, at least for the moment it's a duology, Storm of Locusts. And I have her most recent book in the beginning of a new series. I'm thinking it's a trilogy, but I don't know for sure. But this book is Black Sun, which I read or had a go at a few months ago. Came out, I think, sometime last year. It's an epic fantasy inspired by Mesoamerican history and mythology, and I didn't get past the second chapter because it had one of those scenes with one of those characters that I don't know if it's those scenes and those characters are catnip for most science fiction and fantasy authors, or if it's catnip for most science fiction and fantasy readers, a combination of the two, or what, but it annoys me to no end, those scenes and those characters. So anyway, I bailed. The next book is The Years of Rice and Salt by Kim Stanley Robinson. This is an alternate history novel in which something happened to take out Europe, and in this world, the Middle East and India are basically the world powers. I haven't gotten around to this book yet, but I have tried some other Kim Stanley Robinson novels, and didn't particularly have the best time with them, so anyway. Next is, if you just watched Michael K. Vaughan's Halls of Adventure video, you'll have seen this book. It is The Sleeping Dragon by Joel Rosenberg, book one of Guardians of the Flame, which is one of those books that I'm almost certain I picked up from the Friends of the Library Booksell Nook because I actually read or checked out the omnibus edition of this series years ago and bailed rather quickly. It's basically a portal fantasy in which a group of people from our world, while playing a game sort of like Dungeons and Dragons, are magically transported into a fantasy world that may or may not have matched their game. And I didn't particularly care for it, but for 25 cents I decided, what the heck, I might eventually give it another shot. And I haven't. Next is another book or maybe the beginning of a different series. Oh no, it's the same series. This is The Road Home, which is another book in that series, which I'm pretty sure I picked up from the Friends of the Library Booksell Nook. Or maybe from Golden's, I don't know. The next book is it's a major work of fantasy from the last 20 years. The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, the first book in the King Killer Chronicles. It's the story of a man named Quoth who, in the beginning of the story, he's running an inn, and we learn he was a major magician and all that, and it's basically his life story told to a wandering bard or something. Again, I'm not entirely sure why I have this book, except for there was a period of time when I wanted to collect, that I saw my collection as being mostly science fiction and fantasy, that I should have a lot of the great works of science fiction and fantasy, particularly the newer works. And loving or hating, Patrick Rothfuss is a major writer today, even though he's taking forever to finish his series out, much like George R. R. Martin has. But again, that doesn't negate the fact that I had a go at this book and I really didn't like it. And the only reason why I kind of like maybe would like to keep this is because I really love this cover. It is a very, very nice cover. As long as you don't look at the model's face. Anyway. So, yeah. But I did pick it up from Golden's Book Exchange years ago. Next is another book I don't know why I still have. And that is The Path of Anger. The first book in the Book and the Sword series by Antoine Rouaud. I picked this up years ago. I think I pre-ordered it. I want to say I saw it on Thomas of SFF 180's channel. I think he hauled it. It's about a knight. I don't think he has magical powers, but he's part of the army that conquered this one people, and he finds a young boy who he adopts, and later that young boy basically leads an insurrection against the kingdom or something. It's not terribly good. And I don't think the sequels have ever been published, because I'm going to say it's a French novel. The next two books are, again, classics of science fiction and fantasy, which I don't particularly care for. The Harry Potter series. This is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Sorcerer's Stone. I always think of it as the Philosopher's Stone, but anyway. By J.K. Rowling. Obviously I don't really need to go into plot specifics. Again, I picked this up from Golden's Book Exchange largely because there was a period when I really wanted to focus heavily on science fiction and fantasy, even children's science fiction and fantasy, which led me to pick up a lot of stinkers. And I really do not like this book. I tried it years ago and bailed within paragraphs. The writing is just atrocious. Now, it obviously appeals to people. I mean, millions of people love it. I mean, and I can see how it appeals to children. But there's just, the writing is, for me at least, so bad, and the condescension of the narrator is so rage-inducing that I want to get rid of this book. And if it weren't for the fact that this book is in such rough shape, I would have gotten rid of it years ago. Probably, I'm still going to. And of course, I also have The Chamber of Secrets, the second book in the series, which again I picked up at the same time as I picked up Philosopher's Stone. Next is The White Mists of Power by Christine Catherine Rush. I picked this up from Golden's years ago, largely because Christine Catherine Rush used to blog about science fiction and fantasy, largely the business of writing science fiction and fantasy, and so I picked this up wanting to read her fiction, but I've never gotten around to it. And getting near the end, the second to last book on this shelf is The Ragged Blade by Christopher Ruiz, published by Parvis Press. I think I saw this was hauled by Thomas of SSF 180 years ago, and it sounded interesting, but the book itself is bad. It's about a warrior who is fleeing his ex-boyfriend with his daughter, and the ex-boyfriend magician is after them. It's not terribly good. And finally, the last book on this shelf is The Mask of the Sun by Fred Saberhagen. This is apparently a historical fantasy or contemporary fantasy that I don't know much about. I picked it up from the Friends and Library book sale, I think for 25 cents, and I never got around to it. That said, I have tried some books by Fred Saberhagen. There was one in which if you wear a mask, you kind of became imbued or possessed by the spirit of a god, that I thought was not terribly good. And then I think I read one of his more recent works, and yeah, I failed. So maybe Fred Saberhagen is not a writer for me. So, BookTube, that concludes part 40 of part 41 of my 2022 library tour. So tomorrow, when I do part 42, I will be starting a new bookcase, the final bookcase of my brother's bookcase. And this time, there's only going to be 3 shelves left, because it's a weird bookcase. Anyway, so 3 more videos to go. So until tomorrow, BookTube, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.